Hi, this is Synthchaser from Synthchaser.com. In our last video we took a look at these 4 different ARP Odysseys, took a look at the differences between them, and tore them down and took a look at what they looked like inside. So now that I've torn down these 4 ARP Odysseys, what am I going to do with them? Well, I'm going to do something similar to what I did in the previous video. There are certain things that should be done to all vintage ARP Odysseys to make them A, working correctly, and B, reliable for future use. The main things, we're going to replace all the tantalum capacitors throughout the synthesizer. The tantalum capacitors in the ARPs tend to be failure prone and fail as short circuits causing problems. So there aren't that many of them, and we'll get rid of them. We'll also recap the power supply. There's tantalum capacitors there, as well as some electrolytic capacitors that are pushing 50 years old, and they're past their prime now. We'll come back to discuss this in a minute. We're going to replace all the sliders, and that I'm going to do differently than what I did in my previous video. So I'm going to discuss that in just a second. We're going to clean the switches. We're going to tear down and refurbish the keybeds. So we're going to we're going to wash all these keycaps in the ultrasonic cleaner. We're going to change the key bushings because you can hear the keybeds are quite noisy now. And then we're going to clean the bus bars and the J wires so we get reliable contact. For the ones with the 4075 filter, we're going to take this filter out, and we are going to recap the tantalum capacitors in that. We're going to do an enhancement that raises the cutoff frequency of the filter to correct a design error that ARP made, and then I'm going to test the filter outside the synthesizer to make sure it's working correctly before I put it back in. And obviously there's a few things that are broken, like the toggle switch here, the pot shaft here, and we'll give the case a nice cleaning as well, so everything looks good when we put it back together. So I mentioned I'm going to do the sliders differently than I did in the previous video. Let's talk about the sliders. So the sliders, the signal path runs through the sliders. So these sliders are invariably going to be dirty, and the signal path is going to be interrupted. It can cause problems with functionality, not just annoying dropouts in sound or scratchiness. These sliders, they're very stiff and they're not smooth. And basically these sliders are the way that you can clean the original sliders, and to do that you would need to desolder them from the board. So undo the little twisted tab here, desolder the 3 pins, take the slider out, remove the little clamps from the side, take the slider apart, clean up the parts inside, put them back together, and it may or may not work well when you get it back together. I find that I spend all this time to go through and take these apart, and sometimes the carbon track is damaged or ruined. Sometimes the conductive track is the little tin plating is coming off of that, is delaminating, and it's no good. I do have, and I have available on my website, spare old sliders that you can use for parts, but basically it's a lot of work, and the results are mediocre, and the net result is you still have this crappy slider which wasn't very good to begin with. So for a while, and what I did in the previous video, is I sold these reproduction sliders, and they're okay. I mean, you can hear it kind of rubbing as it goes along. I've stopped carrying these. Feedback was kind of mixed. I had to do a lot of QA on them before I shipped them out to make sure that people were getting quality parts that didn't have dropouts and stuff like that. And basically, it's just not the best solution. So I stopped carrying those, and now I have the these retrofit sliders. So this is just an assembly. You would take out these sliders and then solder this assembly in place. There's little openings so you can still get to the test points and the components that you need to take measurements from or replace or whatever. I mean, it does cover a couple passive components, but they would really never need to be changed. So the advantage here is they're really high quality slider. They're born sliders. They're nice and smooth, and they're pre-assembled and ready to drop in. There are people that sell DIY adapters, so like it's like a little adapter that you can retrofit one born slider to one CTS slider, and they're usually made with these little fiddly pins. So these are what's you have to solder these to like a little sandwich of circuit boards together with these things, and then these little tiny pins are what's mounting onto your synthesizer, and quite honestly they suck. And I'm not biased just because I made a better solution, but they take a lot of time, and they're really fiddly to build, they're fiddly to install, and the net result is you're not getting parallel sliders like you are with these more monolithic assemblies. Why don't I make a DIY version of this? Well, because when someone opens up their synthesizer and sees the Synthchaser sliders in there, I want them to be good quality. If I have other people building them, it can reflect poorly on me, so I don't do that. So these are non-illuminated sliders, and then I also have the illuminated version of that. So these are also nice quality born sliders, and drops in there, and then there's a little connector here for to wire them together to power, and there's a little auxiliary power supply so it doesn't run off the supply from your synthesizer. And I have a couple color options. This one will wind up being the same color scheme as the original slider caps that were on the ARP Odyssey, and then I have another one I'm going to do, I think the black and orange one I'm going to do with the LED sliders, and they'll just be all orange sliders. So yeah, so if you're doing DIY, you can definitely try to disassemble the sliders and clean them up as best as you can, and I have spares available on my website, or if you have the time and patience to do the little DIY adapters that are available elsewhere, that's an option. But I think the best solution is what I've got here, and it's pricier, but it reflects the time to assemble it, and that's time that you won't need to spend, or you won't be needing to pay a tech to spend to assemble your slider set. So with that said, I'm going to get started working on all that stuff that I discussed. If there's anything interesting I spot as I'm doing it, I'll point it out to you. Otherwise, we'll round back up kind of what we did in the previous ARP Odyssey repair video, and I'll set the boards up on the bench and we can test them out and repair any issues that remain. Here they forgot to cut one of the pins of the sliders after they soldered it. You see, these are cut short. This one here is left long. I don't know if it's long enough that it would have poked that interconnect board. I don't think it would have, but even so, the traces are on the other side. Here's all the old sliders removed and all the new sliders waiting to go in. As I'm disassembling the Keybeds, I figured I'd show you the difference between the three different Keybeds that we've got in these ARP Odysseys. So this is the Mark I ARP Odyssey with the 3-bus Keybed, and the key consists of a metal key carrier with a plastic keycap screwed to it, and you'll notice on this that there's no shaft protruding out of this like we'll see on the later ones. Basically, this sits on this little lever that has a little spring underneath it. When you push it down, this little arm moves back and forth. You can see it moving under the Keybed, and I'll flip it over to show you what happens underneath. So looking underneath, we can see that there's 3 bus bars, and when I actuate that lever from the top, like I'm pressing the key down, these 3 springs make contact with the 3 bus bars. And we can see The lower bus bar here has some more precise resistors. That's for our CV. There's a little resistor divider chain of resistors going on there. The next one has a little less precise resistor, and that's our gate bus. And then we see above that there's a diode and a capacitor, which basically integrates the gate and makes a trigger signal. On the later two bus ones, we'll only have the CV and gate bus. And as you can hear, the dogs are getting angry and barking because they don't like this 3-bus keyboard. There's just more room for problems and more stuff to clean. So on this particular style of keybed, we have these little plastic things here. They come off, and sometimes when you take the little key off, it'll wind up stuck underneath because it's got this lubricant that's a little bit sticky. And you see here someone replaced this one with some DIY type one, so we're gonna have to replace that with an original one. But basically these will also need to come off and be cleaned and have fresh lubricant put on because they're just kind of gross right now. And the bushings, let's see how these are looking. These are, yeah, just kind of break apart. So these are going to be replaced on all the keybeds. The last few have been coming off inside the key, so you got to be sure not to lose them. But if you do lose them or you're missing them, the part is called a bell crank cap, and I have a few on my website. Here's all the junk that came off the old bell crank caps. Here's the key from the Mark II Odyssey. So this is the 2-bus keyboard with the metal key lever and the plastic keycap. So it's plastic keycap on the metal lever, but the difference you'll see is there's a metal shaft sticking out from the bottom of this key, which goes through a hole in the bottom of the keybed, whereas previously there was that little arm, the bell crank lever. This goes through and is coupled to the J wires that are beneath. So let me flip it over. So here we are on the bottom side, and you'll notice there's 2 bus bars. Instead of springs, now we've switched over to J wires. There's a precision resistor for the CV bus and a less precise resistor for the gate bus, and the trigger is derived from that in the circuitry of the Odyssey. So when you press a key, so this shaft, this little metal part is sticking through, and it has this little plastic what's called the J-wire guide is stuck onto it, and the little J-wires go through there. So when you push the key, it forces the J-wires against the bus bars of the synthesizer. So with this one, when you take the key off, the little J-wire guide is left behind, and you need to make sure that when you're working on the keybed, these don't slip off and you lose them, because they're kind of hard to replace. So what you want to do is you want to keep the keybed, like if you lift it up, you want to lift it up like this, not like this, because the little J-wire guide can slip off and get lost. And this is the keybed out of the Mark III ARP Odyssey, and in this the keys are made entirely of plastic. So before it was the keycap was screwed to a metal lever, and in this one it's entirely plastic. So this little shaft that goes down, it's made of plastic, and it's very common that these will break. So this keybed is a little less heavy duty than the previous ones, and more susceptible to breaking. These keys also wind up not feeling as good as the other keys. Sometimes they kind of like stick when you when they've been sitting and have been parked for a while. So like your first play on this key bed, it'll feel like the key is sticky, and then you've kind of freed it, and it'll play fine the rest of your session. Then you let it sit again and again, and the first time you press it, it feels like it's sticking. And that's just the nature of this cheaper plastic key. But on the bottom you can see the bottom is pretty much the same, except instead of the metal shaft sticking through, it's the plastic one, and that couples the two J wires to the key, and then they make contact with the bus bars there. It's the same CV and gate buses that are on the other style keybed. You can see that someone's done some very ugly repair work here. I don't know, it shouldn't look like you took a dump on the bottom of the keybed just soldering on a new J-wire, but whatever. In case I didn't show it earlier, the date code on this keybed is November 1st, 1978. So I pulled this board and I'm replacing a few of the J-wires that had been replaced previously because I didn't like the way it was done. This one had it's thicker than a J-wire, and it doesn't bend so well, and the solder joint was a totally cold solder joint. I could see the base of the J-wire flexing when the J-wire flexed. Then we had this one, which was like all oxidized. It has no plating. It's the wrong material. So that and a couple others that didn't look so hot, I'm desoldering them from the bottom here, and I'll solder the new J-wires on. So to get the bus bars really clean, what I've done is I've removed them from under the keybed. And here's one that I've cleaned, and here's the other two that I haven't cleaned yet. And you can see that there's a real difference, and that will be evident when you go to play on the keybed. So for the pitch bend pot with the broken shaft, while I don't have a replacement pot, I have the exact new old stock pot shaft. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to disassemble this pot and put in a new shaft. I have a few of these. I'll make a couple of them available on my website. And then I have a new exact match for the pitch bend knob. So I'll put that on as well. And of course I'll clean the pot while I have it open, and then solder it back onto the board. Recapping the power supply gives me the opportunity to test the bridge diodes out of circuit to see if any of them have opened up. It's a good opportunity to check those and replace it. And then also while I'm at it, I'm checking the fuse, and on this one, the white 2800, I can measure the resistance of the fuse, and we can see that it is blown. So I'll replace this fuse while I'm here. Now I will mention the original fuse is has leads like this and is soldered to the board. And I've seen people come up with very, I don't want to say creative, I think stupid is more the adjective. Stupid solutions to replacing this. I've seen another fuse soldered across the terminals of the old fuse. I've seen the fuse removed and bypassed completely. I've seen some kind of wires soldered to a normal fuse and fuse holders added and stuff like that. The fuse is a safety device, and you really just don't want to play games here. So it's not that hard to get the right fuse with the leads and solder it in place. So here are the capacitors that I replaced from the 4 ARP Odysseys. Not a ton of capacitors, considering this is coming out of 4 synthesizers. But we got the power supply filter capacitors and then all the little tantalum capacitors throughout the synthesizer, including the ones in the filter module for the 4075. I didn't desolder the 4023, which is potted. I'm not going to crack that open to recap the tantalums in it if there's nothing wrong with them, and we'll find out if there's anything wrong with them when I test the board. The 4075, though, I have, since it's not potted or encapsulated, I've changed the tantalum capacitors, and then also made a change to correct the cutoff frequency. Apparently there was a design error made by ARP when they designed the filter, and I changed some components to correct that so it gives a proper frequency response. And since I have this out, I'm going to test this in my little test fixture. And I think right here, right before we dive into testing and troubleshooting and repairing, would be a good place to break this installment of the video, and we'll pick up next time by testing out the filters. I'm Synthchaser from synthchaser.com. Thanks for watching and have a great day.